a very warm welcome for this webinar, which is really looking at Leave No Child Behind, revisiting the 2030 agenda for children amid COVID-19. Uh, you know, uh, the year 2020 will be remembered for many issues. One of them is going to be COVID-19. And as of today, the world has recorded more than 13 million COVID-19 positive cases. And just today, India has crossed the 1 million COVID-19 positive case mark. So we've become the third largest, highest country in terms of positive COVID-19 cases. So within this context, it will be too little a statement to say that the COVID-19 is really threatening the rights of children globally within the Asia Pacific region and also in India. And the people who are getting more affected by it are children who from most vulnerable families, and especially the girls. So in light of that, I think this particular webinar is very critical. The year 2030 also marks a very important component that, we've already crossed 5 years since the Agenda 2030 was adopted. So it actually leaves us with just 10 more years to meet the 2030 agenda of SDG goals. Uh, we are still 5 years after the adoption of SDG, but still much more is desired. While, globally and also within the region and India, the government and the civil society organizations have really been working to ensure that, the SDGs for children are reached. But as you all would know, there's a lot more which needs to be desired. And now within the COVID context, the vision of achieving the 2030 agenda is going to become much more uphill. So in light of that, we think the multidimensional challenges which have been caused by COVID-19, which are impacting the rights of children, it is very important that we look back and see and revisit some of the SDG agendas and see what more needs to be done so that no child is left behind. So we have organized this webinar inviting key experts who represent some of the critical stakeholders. We have a child representative. We've got a representative from one of the largest India's network of civil society organizations. We've got the CEO of Save the Children and the director of our regional ACCM region of Asia, to actually discuss what are the implications which COVID is having on meeting the SDG agenda for children, and more so what more needs to be done. So this will be a moderated panel discussion. Unfortunately, we will not be able to open it to the audience for raising questions verbally, but you can write, you can use the webinar chat to put in whatever questions and comments you have. So without wasting too much of time, because we just have 1 hour, I would just like to quickly introduce the panelists, and post the panel discussion, we are also going to be releasing a report, which we will get into details later. So our first and foremost panelist is Soni Khatun. She is a child champion from Kolkata, West Bengal, which is a state in India. And Soni has been living in the dock areas of Kolkata, and she was denied access to quality education amongst a lot of other hardships which she has faced, but she has not let that deter her. She, along with the children's group, has been actively campaigning for more than 10 years for better infrastructure with the local MLAs for years. And 2019 was also a milestone in Soni's life, where she, along with Team India North, traveled to London to represent India in the Street Child Cricket World Cup. So, Soni, a warm welcome to you. आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई सोनी कि आप हमारे इस पैनल में ज्वाइन कर पाए. We will. The constraint is that I would be talking in English and Soni will be speaking in Hindi, but we will be translating. A transcript of her, what she's saying will also be done in English. So please look at the chat box as she speaks. The second panelist is Annie Namala. And Annie is currently the national convener of Vada Na Todo Abhiyan. which is a national campaign of over 3,500 civil society organizations working against poverty and social exclusion. Vadana Toro anchors the SDG process at the national level in India and is the counterpart of the global call for action against poverty. She's got 2 decades of experience in the development sector in India with a focus on marginalized communities, and she actively engages in national and global forums and process to promote the rights of the socially excluded communities. So very warm welcome to you, Annie. We are very lucky to have Shaheen. Shaheen Chugdai, he is Save the Children's International Regional Advocacy and Campaigns Director of Asia. He has worked across a wide range of humanitarian and development issues and contexts in various policy and influencing roles for the past 15 years. Shaheen provides leadership and strategic direction to the organization's campaign, advocacy, and communications across the region, working with more than a dozen country offices. So a warm welcome to you, Shaheen. And finally, Bidisha Pillai. Bidisha is the CEO of Save the Children India. She has more than 2 decades experience as a social development and policy specialist, working on a range of issues which include child rights, women's empowerment, food and nutrition security, substance abuse, HIV prevention, and ICT for development. She currently also represents Save the Children and the global CSO community on the global partnership to end violence against children. So a warm welcome to you, Bidisha. So with this short introduction, I think we will start the panel discussion. What we would be doing is we'll be doing 2 rounds of moderated questions. So we will first start, the first panelist is going to be Soni, and I will ask her a question in Hindi and I will then translate it for the larger audience in English. तो सोनी आपसे हमारा एक मुख्य सवाल ये है कि आपने देखा है कोरोना वायरस से 3.5 महीने हो गए हैं और हम लोग फिर भी उभर के नहीं आ पाए हैं। तो आप हमको ये बताना चाहेंगे कि आपको क्या लगता है कि ये कोरोना वायरस के वजह से सबसे महत्वपूर्ण अधिकार कौन सा है बच्चों का जो बहुत प्रभावित हुआ है? The main right which has been impacted of children because of coronavirus. संक्षेप में बताएंगे?
Yes, ma'am. मैम मेरे हिसाब से लगता है कि राइट टू प्रोटेक्शन और राइट टू एजुकेशन ज़्यादा बच्चों पे प्रभाव पड़ा है, क्योंकि जिस एरिया में हम रहते हैं वहाँ पे पोर्ट एरिया है और स्लम एरिया है, तो ज़्यादातर पेरेंट्स काम पे जाते हैं बच्चों लोग को छोड़ करके। जब 3 महीने लॉकडाउन था तब तक पेरेंट्स बच्चों के साथ थे, लेकिन अभी तो स्कूल भी बंद है और पेरेंट्स काम पे जा रहे हैं, तो बच्चे घर पे अकेले ही रह रहे हैं, स्कूल भी नहीं जा रहे, ना ICDS सेंटर खुला है वहाँ भी नहीं जाते, तो बच्चे घर पे अकेले ही रह रहे, क्या करें क्या नहीं कर रहे, उनके साथ बुरा भी कुछ हो सकता है, गलत राह पे भी जा सकते हैं, और इस सिचुएशन में उन लोगों के साथ ट्रैफिकिंग का चांसेस भी बढ़ जाता है। 2-3 दिन पहले ही न्यूज़ में आया था कि एक बच्चा कुआं में खेलते खेलते गिर गया और 4 बच्चे और देखने गए तो उसके साथ वो भी गिर गए, तो ऐसा न्यूज़ भी सुनने में आता है। तो राइट टू प्रोटेक्शन ज़्यादा प्रभावित है, और दूसरा राइट टू एजुकेशन है। राइट टू एजुकेशन इसलिए क्योंकि फिलहाल लॉकडाउन खुला है, तो अभी ऑनलाइन क्लासेस हो रहा है, लेकिन जिन लोगों के पास फ़ोन या सुविधाएं नहीं, टेक्निक नहीं है, उन लोग तो क्लासेस नहीं कर पाए। जैसे हम भी 2 महीने से क्लासेस स्टार्ट हो चुका था, स्कूल भी खुल चुका, ऑनलाइन क्लासेस हो रहा है, लेकिन हम अटेंड नहीं कर पा रहे क्योंकि मेरे पास फ़ोन नहीं था। वैसे और भी बच्चे होंगे, और पहले जब लॉकडाउन नहीं था तो 35% बच्चे ऐसे थे जो स्कूल नहीं जाते थे, लेकिन अभी तो लॉकडाउन की वजह से 100% बच्चे स्कूल नहीं जा रहे हैं। और हम लोगों का ग्रुप था, जो शक्तिमान ग्रुप था जो हम लोग बनाए थे, तो हम लोग का एक मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव था कि सारे बच्चे स्कूल में जाए, लेकिन अभी तो हमको लग रहा है स्कूल खुलने के बाद भी बच्चे उतने स्कूल नहीं जा पाएंगे। हमको लगता है बहुत बच्चे ड्रॉप आउट हो जाएंगे, और कुछ बच्चे ऐसे होंगे जो चाइल्ड लेबर भी बन जाए, क्योंकि ऐसा सिचुएशन में आर्थिक स्थिति भी तो उन लोग का खराब होगा, तो मजबूरन उन लोगों को भी, बच्चे लोगों को भी फिर से काम में जाना पड़ेगा। तो ये हमारे लिए जब खुलेगा तो चैलेंजिंग होगा उन्हें फिर से वापस स्कूल भेजना।
थैंक यू सोनी। आपने बहुत संक्षेप में बहुत अच्छी तरह से बताया। What Sony highlighted highlighted was that there are two important rights which she thinks are being impacted. One is, she said, the right to education, and the second is the right to protection, and both are interrelated. So the right to education is because of the lockdown, the schools have still not resumed, and that is, and her concern is that earlier there was lesser dropout, but now with the lockdown, schools not reopening, there are chances of a larger dropout, and then it is getting impacted in terms of the children who are out of schools. They're likely to be get into more child labor related issues, and also this whole piece on child trafficking. So that's a concern area for her. And she's also mentioned that her group, the children's group, Shakti Swabhiman group, which she's been working with, Habit
Shaktiman Group.
Shaktiman group, which she has been, working with. One of the main aims was to ensure that, the children return back to school and that they prevent dropout. But unfortunately, now their work is going to get enhanced because the lockdown has really impacted both the right to education and also the right to protection. So thank you so much, Soni. We'll come back to you with iske baad kya karna chahiye. We will come back to you on that. I will then move on to Vidisha, and I would just request if Vidisha could be zoomed in. I'm not sure the focus is on the people who are speaking. Yeah. Okay. So Bidisha, my question is that, like we said, the COVID-19 scenario has been impacting the rights of children. And because Save the Children has been doing a considerable amount of work on really looking at child-focused SDGs, would you like to highlight what has exactly been our work to ensure that, child-focused SDGs are met, and what implications do you, as a CEO of Save the Children, feel that COVID-19 has had on the SDG agenda for children in India?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll also try and be brief, Namrata, and I'm sorry कि सोनी मैं इंग्लिश में बात करूंगी क्योंकि हमारे जो listeners हैं सबको हिंदी नहीं आती है, but I'm hoping कि
मैम मुझे इंग्लिश थोड़ी थोड़ी आती है समझ में.
Very good, very good. So, if someone had asked this question on progress towards SDGs and child rights before COVID, I think, we would have all said that significant progress has been made in India on poverty reduction, and lifting people out of absolute poverty. There were definitely more children who were able to at least access education. Quality of learning, of course, was still a concern. And our, under 5 mortality and infant mortality rates were certainly progressing quite well, and there was significant progress made. There were still challenges even then, and I think malnutrition was certainly a big concern. At that point of time, learning outcomes, as I said, is something that was on top of everybody's minds at that point of time. And I think inequality and discrimination based on various factors, including gender, was something that we were lagging in even then. So, for example, if I look at the World Economic Forum last year, I think there was a report which said that it will take us another 100 years really to achieve gender parity. So that was the situation. Now, if anything, if COVID has done one thing, I think it has firstly actually exacerbated these problems that were already there. So the challenges that were there and where we were already slowing down have actually been amplified and multiplied. And even the areas where we had actually the world and India had made progress, there has been significant reversal on that. And I think it will be, we will need to sort of now think of reshaping our strategy over the next 10 years, keeping that in mind. What started out as a health crisis very quickly converted into an economic crisis, and it is most certainly already moving in the direction of an entire sort of, social crisis, which is going to be compounded by all of these elements. And given the fact that about 1/5 of the children live in India, and what India does for its children during this time on the SDGs and making progress towards them is actually going to impact the global goals as well. For us at Save the Children, we have been engaged not just with the SDGs, but with the Millennium Development Goals also, I think primarily on 2 fronts. One is, of course, to align our own programming, evidence, and advocacy efforts to the Sustainable Development Goals so that we are able to shape national policy, national thinking, and make sure that the national priorities also align with the child-focused sustainable development goals. That's one piece. So working with the relevant ministries, providing the right kind of data, evidence, etc. But the second piece has been very much, and that's, I would put that in the whole bucket of working on the supply side of things, so system strengthening really. And then on the other side is working very, very closely with communities, with grassroots organizations, but also civil society networks and organizations, so that they understand the importance of the SDGs, so that they can develop and adopt accountability and monitoring frameworks with which they can hold the duty bearers and hold the providers of rights to account with regard to the child-related SDGs. So for example, most recently, I think we contributed to the children's section of the Leave No One Behind report, which India presented as part of their own VNR process in the high-level political forum, etc. And I think this is something that Save the Children has done globally, and we do in India as well. So working both on the with the government on to shape the policies and programming interventions, but again, very much working with the communities and grassroots organizations to provide that space to raise the demand, understand their rights, but also the space for civil society and networks across the spectrum to engage with this process. I'm just going to give you a few numbers very quickly to substantiate why I think this reversal is going to be so significant, and also, just what Soni said is exactly right in terms of the challenges we're seeing. So since the lockdown, we actually in Save the Children, we did a survey. We've been doing a rapid assessment. We've just completed a second round in across 15 states. Those are our programming states, with close to about 7,400 households. And we were trying to understand really the impact of the pandemic on these households with regard to the various SDG indicators. And I give you a flavor. So if you look at your poverty and hunger, so it impacting basically across almost all the SDGs, certainly 8 of the children-related SDGs, for sure. So on the poverty and hunger piece, we have found that at least 75% of the people living in these households have lost their access to livelihoods, and they are facing a severe cash crunch. So they don't have cash savings beyond what would take them beyond a week. That's about 80% of these households. And close to 45% of these households have already started resorting to distress measures, which means they're either going for very high interest loans, or they're mortgaging things, or they're even beginning to sell off their personal belongings, right? And that's the first indicator. It is going to have a significant impact on all of the other child rights related SDGs. 33% of these households said that their children have lost access to any form of midday meal, and about 60% of them were not getting any take-home rations, which means that's contributing not just to the hunger, but certainly to the malnutrition piece. So where there was already significant stunting, I think we can expect that that number or that percentage is certainly going to be on the rise in the absence of not just food, but quality food, which would be able to contribute to looking at children's nutrition. I think in terms of overall health, about 60% of the households we spoke to said that the children have not been able to access any immunization because the Anganwadi centers and the health centers have been closed. And that's corroborated, I think, by the UNICEF report that was published, which said that actually, if you're looking at the data in India alone, they are thinking, the predictions are that there will be at least 3 lakh more under 5 deaths because of this lack of access to routine immunization, etc., etc. I think, as Soni highlighted, access to learning has been a huge loss. 62% of the children that we have spoken to in the families have completely discontinued education. So to Soni's point, they don't have access to any form of being able to access the online learning. And their education is discontinued, but even worse, already about 25% of the children are engaged in some form of work at home, which means that this whole theory that Soni is sort of highlighting for us, that the risk of lack of education means that there is an immediate risk of children being put back into labor or being trafficked or being married off early. So the protection issues will continue to rise as children miss out on education opportunities, but also as poverty grows, right? When a household does not have the basic livelihood option, they will sort of resort to these measures of looking at, either getting their girls married off early or the children married off early or involving them in work. So that, I think, is, to my mind, in a nutshell, some of the impacts that we are already seeing, literally just 3.5 months into this crisis for us, at least in India. And I think this is a trend that is probably going to get worse. We have to keep an eye on it. And the SDGs will be at risk if we don't recognize the challenges that we're facing now and look at the appropriate solutions in this sort of an environment and framework. So I'll stop there and look forward to hearing from the others as well.
No, thank you so much, Bidisha, for actually highlighting, based on also real evidence, in terms of how the rights of children and also vulnerable families, how they're going to be, are being challenged, and definitely it's going to make the whole meeting the 2030 agenda a much more difficult proposition. So with that, I would like to kind of move on to Annie. Annie, as as the national convener for a network of more than 3,500 NGOs of India. How is Vadana Todo working with government, civil society organizations, and vulnerable communities on sustainable development agenda? And what do you think from your side also, where you are placed, what do you think are the critical challenges to the Leave No One Behind agenda due to COVID-19? Few insights of from your side would be very helpful, because Bidisha did highlight this whole issue of its impact also largely on child rights, but it would be great to know also in terms of its larger impact on other vulnerable communities, and some measures on which Vadana Todo has been working around that particular agenda.
Thank you, Namrata. And thank you. I will take this opportunity to thank SAVE for being such a consistent partner to the Vadana Todo Abhiyan. Thank you. Thank you, Bidisha and all SAVE. Very briefly, from what Namrata said, I just want to take a minute to expand on Vadana Todo. Maybe there are other people who are not so connected to the campaign, being also a larger network. Vadana Todo was initiated in around 2005-06. The whole purpose was a campaign with a network to look at governance accountability to end exclusion and poverty. And in India, like many other countries, there are various layers of social exclusion which interrelates with poverty, and then the two together really ensures the intergenerational poverty, rights violations, and a backwardness in development indicators. So the whole focus of Vadana Todo felt that we need governance accountability to look at the twin issues of poverty and social exclusion. And early on, the campaign also decided on 3 focal areas which they thought are very important to carry the agenda of governance accountability. So these 3 focal points have been the 3 pillars that the campaign has been moving forward with. So one is an annual report, which is like an expert come civil society report on what we understand as the government's performance in that year with respect to the plans that they had made, with respect to the budgets that they had made, with respect to the campaigns they had initiated. So we have an annual promise and reality report on the government's performance. We also have had a long focus on the MDG, SDG. So we do have a civil society collaborative report on the progress of the SDG implementation. And as a third focus, we have, I think, people's voices and issues before union elections. So these have been the 3 critical pillars that the campaign has been moving forward. I just want to add that when the SDG came up, one thing that really attracted Vadana Todo is the whole principle of leave no one behind and reaching the furthest behind first. We thought this is really an action agenda that we can take forward. Given the context of India, where you have at least about 40 to 50% of the population who face some level of social exclusion or the other. We have about 16-17% of Dalit communities, another 8 to 9% of tribal communities, another 14% of religious minorities, and then if you add the nomadic communities and people with disability and LGBT communities, we would easily cross more than 60% of the population who face systemic barriers in really moving forward and being part of society. So we felt that this particular piece of the SDGs is very critical for a campaign like us to move forward. And in this whole addressing this particular piece of leaving no one behind, what we also realized is, government is no more willing to talk about case studies and instances of something happening. They are today asking us evidences, data. How are communities being left behind? If you say that they are being left behind, where are they left behind? What is the data that is talking about it? So we felt that it is important at this time to bring in disaggregated data of communities so that we are able to really track and say these communities are behind the national development progress by at least this many. This is the gap. This is the inequality that is actually there between them and other communities. And I think that was a right direction, because across the globe now we see a demand for disaggregated data, community generated data, and I think civil society and other organizations are really moving forward demanding such data. So what we did was, given that India already has a categorization like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, but within them are multiple smaller communities. Like the scheduled caste is about 3,000 communities within the scheduled caste. The tribes have about 700 and odd communities within scheduled tribes. And if you look at any of these categories, the intersectionalities, so we decided to get community generated data from communities themselves, help them to gather these data, help them to analyze this data. So we felt that that would be a contribution that Vadana Todo really builds into the whole SDG debate. And so far, with all the kind of partners that Vadana Todo has, we've been able to collect disaggregated data on such communities on at least 20 to 25 SDG indicators. And our focus has been leave no one behind as a principle. And I think that is why the government also felt that in this VNR, it's an opportunity to get civil society to engage and focus on the leave no one behind communities. And because of the kind of networking that we are involved in and already engaged with network organizations, like say the child rights organizations linked to Vadana Todo have at least about 300, 400 organizations that they work with. So we were able to impress upon the government to have consultations for at least about 16 communities, which included children, youth, Dalits, religious minorities, refugees, nomadic communities, and over 1,000 organizations could engage in this process. And I think when we were just looking at the report, we felt this is really like we the people of this country, and it gives you recommendations for the decade of action. So we really have a blueprint for the decade of action that the that the UN is talking about, that our countries have agreed to. So we feel this kind of work that civil society can do actually can contribute. In this, I would also just like to add that with Save the Children, we'd also worked on leave no child behind, because we felt it's important to look at the intersections even within these communities. It would be gender at one level, it would be people with disabilities at another level, it would be youth, it would be children. And given the context that communities matter so much, families matter so much for a child's opportunities, for a child's development, and given the structural inequalities and imbalances we have, every community has certain opportunities and certain barriers. So we felt it's important to map these barriers of these communities and locate the children within these communities. So we did have this 9 communities, which we will talk a little later about more. But I think it gives an added understanding of the child's vulnerabilities beyond understanding just the child's own vulnerabilities, but also related to the family. So I just want to stop here maybe to say that, it's been really, though it's a very painful experience to understand the realities of vulnerable communities, it's also very important to forefront them, highlight them, and look for collective opportunities for addressing them later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie, for sharing, the details about what Vadana Toro and what civil society, as a collective can do to ensure that the government is held accountable to meet the 2030 agenda, and the whole significance of evidence, which was also highlighted in Bidisha's, conversation, where really looking at data from the children, from the most vulnerable communities, and basing our demands based on the rich evidence, so that the child rights are not relegated, to the periphery. More so now with COVID-19, where I think it's very important that we as collective keep harping and keep impressing on the government that we have to ensure that no child is left behind vis-a-vis the whole component on the social development agenda. So with that, I would like to invite Shaheen. Yeah, so Shaheen, I think right now we've been having, the context has been more India, because we've talked about Sony from Calcutta, and then Bidisha has talked about our work in 15 states, at least in terms of evidence, and covering more than 18 states overall. And uh, Annie has really talked about how civil society organizations nationally are working and engaging with the agenda of social development goals. But as the director of advocacy campaign communication covering the Asia Pacific region, we thought it's very important, because COVID and SDG cut across borders, and and children, vulnerability of children is not restricted by borders. So we would be very interested to also understand that in terms of what do you see as the impact of COVID-19 on the rights of children? And maybe it would be interesting if you could also give us some examples or illustrations of different countries, because that will just highlight the whole significance of rights of children being impacted not only in India but in the region and also globally.
Sure.
So over to you, Shaheen.
Sure. Thank you very much for that, and hello everyone. So my experience in the sector for many years going back was predominantly in humanitarian context. So that's where I cut my teeth when it came to NGO advocacy and media work and campaigning work. So I've worked in many disaster contexts, so-called natural disasters and also conflicts. So in this crisis, in this pandemic, I was astonished to see just the sheer scale and the complexity of this. And looking at it, you can see that there are some elements of it which are familiar with other disasters. So for example, the impact on poor marginalized communities and their children tends to be greater. But at the same time, as you were saying, the pandemic doesn't recognize borders, nor does it recognize distinctions between caste or creed, between rich or poor. So we've seen, as you've seen in India in quite recently, that you can be a famous Bollywood actor and you are not safe from COVID-19. You can be a child from a fairly wealthy family, but your school has still been closed. So the kinds of restrictions that we have seen, and then the secondary impacts of that, have actually touched various lives at different levels. So when it comes to actually solutions, I think there are potentially some opportunities there, because in a sense, there is a sense of solidarity between people within borders, but also across borders, that perhaps provides an opportunity when it comes to the more ambitious agenda for change that we would be looking for. But we've seen that essentially we've seen two kinds of overarching crisis unfold across the region. So we've seen a public health crisis, and lots of countries, whether they were low-income countries or middle-income countries, so many countries have struggled to provide the kind of healthcare and assistance that their populations have required. And then there's been an enormous economic impact. They've often been linked, but they haven't always been linked. So for example, we've seen in some Pacific Island states where some of those states have had very few cases, or indeed no cases at all in some cases. So they haven't faced a public health emergency, but their economies have still collapsed because they were dependent, for example, on the tourism industry. So by April, over 50% of the global population was in lockdown. So, and that affected, again, both high-income countries, middle-income countries, and low-income countries. And the projections of the economic impact of that have in fact been evolving. So back in May, for example, the Asian Development Bank updated its projections, and they said that they were looking at an economic impact in the Asia Pacific of somewhere between 6 and 9%. But I think that those projections are likely to change. So Singapore, a high-income country, which is where I'm based now, has just reported that it's in Q2, its economy shrank by more than 40%, which is staggering. I mean, normally you have to be invaded by a much bigger foreign country for that kind of economic shock. So the Asia Development Bank also said that about 70% of global job losses would happen in the Asia Pacific. So the governments across the region have tried to respond to that. So we've seen in India, but across South Asia, in Southeast Asia, and again, whether, you know, in both middle-income countries and in high-income countries, that governments have intervened in many different ways. So they've tried to provide more social protection, state benefits, income support, and that kind of support to try to keep employment going and to keep their economies going. But what we found, and this is where the disaster, the pandemic has started to resemble the traditional crises, is that communities which are socially excluded, households that are more dependent on informal work or domestic migrant work, for example, have struggled to access the kind of support that has been on offer. So that could be social protection, but for instance, we've also seen that there were significant attempts to move services and goods online. So education was provided more online. So we had online schools, we had businesses moving more operations online, supermarkets started delivering more online, and more people started working from home. But if you are a member of a poor, vulnerable, or remote rural household, then those kinds of solutions are less likely to be available to you. And so the children in those kinds of situations have suffered more. So with the kind of multi-dimensional impacts that we have seen, and we've touched upon some of this, for example, when Sonia was talking about increasing incidences of violence against children and abuse, yes, that is a common picture across the region, but particularly in those kind of communities that have not been able to access the kind of support that was on offer. So the financial stresses have been greater, the emotional stresses have been greater, and those kind of pressures then add to and exacerbate the risk of, for example, various kinds of violence and abuse, whether it's early marriage or whether it's direct physical abuse. So we have seen significant rises, for example, in calls to hotlines across South Asia and Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, but also in higher income, middle income, and higher income countries such as South Korea, for example. So it's the rights of children have been affected across the board and also at multiple levels. But yes, for those countries who have been investing in making progress in many respects across the Sustainable Development Goals, they are now seeing decades of effort and investment at risk. And the added challenge that we are seeing from this pandemic is that, unlike a traditional disaster where there is a more, very often a more linear path between the initial shock, a recovery phase, and then a rebuilding and a reconstruction phase, is that this pandemic is not following a linear path. So we've already seen in many countries across the region, for example, Beijing a few weeks ago, lockdown was imposed again there. That is something that we're seeing both within the region, but of course, across the world as well. So this pandemic is not following a linear path. And what that means is that the kinds of challenges that we have seen in the last few months, there is no certainty or predictability about how we are going to emerge from the current context. So we are likely to see lockdown restrictions, movement restrictions reimposed. We are likely to see restrictions on education where they have been lifted, reimposed. Businesses are not going to be able to return to normal in the short term. And then when it comes to the longer term solutions, there is a big question mark about what is the kind of normal that we would want to return to. So I can leave it there for now.
Thank you so much, Shaheen. And I think you have actually painted quite a grim picture of the Asia Pacific region, but that is the reality. Like you said, the unpredictability and of this pandemic is what is going to be a major challenge, not only for policymakers, but also for implementers, for civil society organizations. And that's why I think these kind of discourses are very important to be able to, one is, capture the evidences to show that how it is impacting rights of children, but also to understand that the problem is much more complex. And while it is impacting and it does not have, it is going to be impacting across the socioeconomic lines, but the vulnerability of the children, and especially the most marginalized communities, for them to be able to bear the shock of the economic challenges, of the disruption of services are going to be much more. And that's why it makes it much more important to put them right in front when you are looking at policy decisions, when you are looking at ensuring that your government is re-looking at some of their priorities. And within all that, I think it's very important that children are put in the center because it may be treated as a public health crisis, and the chances of the fact that it's not many children who get impacted, but directly impacted. But I think, like you said, the multidimensional risks for children, especially of most vulnerable communities, makes it more important that they are kept in the center. So from really unpacking what the scenario is, which is, like all of us have said, it is a grim scenario. I think we have to move forward, and it's very important that we look at some solutions. And I know all of us have been at our context talking about different solutions, advocating with the government. So very quickly, we would like to just get, this is going to be a much shorter round of about 3-4 minutes, just some critical high-end recommendations of what the government and also what we as civil society organizations and in general, as citizens, what is it that we need to do. So we will start with Soni. Soni, हम लोगों ने आधे घंटे से हमने ये सुना कि कोरोना वायरस और कोविड से बहुत सारे बच्चों की राइट्स इम्पैक्ट हुए हैं, बहुत सारे आपने भी बोला कि राइट टू एजुकेशन इम्पैक्ट हो रहा है, प्रोटेक्शन के इश्यूज अब और उभर के आ रहे हैं. तो आपको क्या लगता है कि अगर मैं आपसे पूछूं कि अगर आप बच्चों को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं और आप सरकार से 3 मुख्य सुझाव देना चाहे सरकार को कि अगर ये सरकार ये 2 या 3 चीजें कर ले तो काफी हद तक जो मुसीबतें बच्चों पे आई है, स्पेशली बच्चे जो वंचित वर्गों से हैं, उनकी स्थिति थोड़ी ठीक हो सकती है, तो आपके वो सुझाव क्या होंगे? मेन 2-3 अगर मेन सुझाव आप देना चाहें सरकार को.
मैम, ये लॉकडाउन जो खुलेगा तो ये इसके बाद जो बच्चे लोग तो बहुत पढ़ाई भूल चुके होंगे और पीछे चले गए, और गवर्नमेंट जो सिलेबस रिड्यूस कर दिया, हमको नहीं लगता उससे कुछ होने वाला है। लेकिन टीचर्स को जब स्कूल खुल जाए तो टीचर्स लोग को ज़्यादा इंटरेस्ट लेके बच्चों को इंटरेस्ट ला के पढ़ाना और उन लोगों को बैकअप करना चाहिए। और सरकार से मेरा एक डिमांड है कि प्राइवेट स्कूल क्यों बना है सर? एक ही स्कूल रहता, गवर्नमेंट ही रहता, प्राइवेट क्यों होगा? हमको लगता है कि अगर ये लॉकडाउन या कोविड नहीं आता, इससे पहले भी फिर जब सिचुएशन नॉर्मल होने लगेगा तो भी यही डिमांड रहेगा कि ये गवर्नमेंट स्कूल ही रहता, पर प्राइवेट क्यों है? एजुकेशन सिस्टम तब तक अच्छा नहीं हो सकता हमको लगता है जब तक ये प्राइवेट स्कूल रहेगा। अगर एक ही स्कूल रहेगा, यूनिफॉर्म रहेगा, तब एजुकेशन में सुधार आएगा। जब बड़े लोगों के जो भी बच्चे हैं वो भी वो स्कूल में, गवर्नमेंट में जाएंगे तो उन लोग भी वॉइस को रेस करेंगे कि स्कूल में ऐसा होना चाहिए, वैसा होना चाहिए। हम लोग का हर चीज़ के लिए मतलब ये क्या बोलते हैं इसको, ये हर चीज़ के लिए टैक्स देते हैं, लेकिन फिर गवर्नमेंट अलग है, प्राइवेट अलग है, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए। सबके लिए एक जैसा यूनिफॉर्म स्कूल होना चाहिए।
एक्सीलेंट सोनी, आई थिंक आपने बहुत बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात करी। आपने बोला कि what she's saying is that once the schools open, it is very important that it is not only reduction of syllabus, but we also have to ensure that from the teachers there is a backup, additional support which is given to the students. So that's her one demand. And second, I think it's a very important demand, and the government should take note of that it is the responsibility of the government to deliver education. They should not resort to privatization. And I think as an advocate, I think this is a very pertinent demand. And why should there be two different educational systems? Why can the government not just strengthen the public education system, so that the quality is equal for all children who can afford education or who cannot afford education? So Soni, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। हम ये आपकी जो ये डिमांड है इसको रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हैं। आई नो आपके पास और भी मुख्य, बिकॉज आप इतने 10 सालों से जुड़े हुए हैं बच्चों अपने ग्रुप के साथ, और आप सरकार के साथ ऑलरेडी बहुत मांगे रख रहे हैं, बहुत स्ट्रांगली एडवोकेट कर रहे हैं। आपके और भी सुझाव होंगे तो वो हम डेफिनेटली आपसे लेंगे और सरकार तक पहुंचाएंगे। सो बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सोनी। और कुछ बोलना है आपको?
नहीं मैम,
ओके,
थैंक यू पार्टिसिपेट हमको इसमें करने का मौका मिला, इसके लिए थैंक यू।
नहीं, और आपने बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा पिकअप करा है एजुकेशन का, और आई थिंक वो बहुत ज़रूरी है। जैसे आपने बोला कि अगर ये एड्रेस नहीं होगा तो इसके साथ काफ़ी सारे इश्यूज लिंक्ड हैं, प्रोटेक्शन के इश्यूज लिंक्ड हैं। सो चाहे वो अपफ्रंट एजुकेशन का मुद्दा कोविड के रिलेशन में अपफ्रंट नहीं आया हो पहले, बट अब आप जैसे बोल रहे हैं ये बहुत ज़रूरी है कि सरकार इस पे जोर दे और इस पे चर्चा करें कि जो आपका to ensure that we have to ensure that we keep, when we are deciding our education policies and program, the child at the end needs to be kept at the center. I think that's very, very critical. So thank you, Soni. Now, I would like to go to Shaheen. Shaheen, you did kind of map out the situation and the challenges across Asia Pacific vis-a-vis the rights of children being impacted because of COVID. So would you like to just highlight some top 3 recommendations from your side, so that as your recently launched report, COVID-19 pandemic, lessons from Asia Pacific, as that report says, so that children emerge stronger from the crisis. So some top 3 recommendations from your side would be very valuable.
Well, I think there is a top 1 recommendation which isn't specific to a particular theme, because I think it's important to for us all to realize that we have entered an age of more frequent pandemics, and indeed there will be other crises and disasters because of things like the climate emergency. So anything that we do now must not only respond to the current emergency, but must actually lay the foundations for greater prevention to reduce the risks of future pandemics and indeed other disasters. So I know, and I noticed in a comment in the chat box about a resource crunch, but if we leave our societies underprepared for future pandemics and future disasters, then everyone's resources are just going to melt away because we'll be continually suffering these enormous economic shocks. So I think we first have to, the first recommendation is a mindset change where we don't just leave it to governments, but we require a whole of society approach, right? So yes, there must be a robust response now to limit the spread of the disease and to treat those who need treatment and to get children safely back to school. Yes, that must all happen, but we need to make the kind of investments, and this means budget reallocations, budget reprioritizations, and conversations between society and governments about what kind of society you want and what the new normal should be in an age of increasing crises, increasing shocks of the kind of scale that we have seen. In a sense, we have been lucky that COVID-19 was not as infectious as measles and not as lethal as, say, SARS, but we may not be this lucky next time. And therefore, yes, we need to make investments in public health. We need to make investments in public connectivity and to make sure that people can access online solutions. And that also includes looking at things like affordability of devices. We need to expand social protection and make entitlements more universal so that they don't miss out and leave behind poor households and their children. And we need to look at what is causing these more frequent pandemics, most of which are as a result of animal viruses jumping to human beings. We need to look at why that's happening and to take steps to address the kind of environmental degradation and disruption to ecosystems that is actually one of the root causes of those pandemics. So I will leave it there because I know we're running short of time.
Thank you, Shaheen. I think you've kind of, you've given us the bigger picture of prevention. I think that's very important. Mindset change and definitely, investment. And you cannot undermine this whole component of investing in better public health and also social protection and just budget for children. I think that's very, very essential. And linking up this whole component of the climate crisis as well as COVID. I think there's been a lot of discourse where you are really looking at also trying to understand what are the linkages and working to prepare a more sustainable solution rather than just having knee-jerk reactions. So thank you so much, Shaheen. I would now want to go to Annie. I think Annie, from your side, one would just want to understand what's your key demand from the government with regards to achieving the SDG 2030 agenda, especially on the roles of civil society organizations, because as you've seen, there has already been a shrinking of civic space. So vis-a-vis, so your demands or your requests from the government and also from UN on how civil society can continue playing a leading role in really trying to hold the government accountable on SDGs and also collaborating, as a collaborative equal partner to ensuring that we don't slip on our SDG 2030 agenda. Over to you, Annie. Some top 2-3 recommendations because I'm mindful of the time.
Yes, very quickly, Namrata, just a few things. I think from what Shaheen has also said, our focus should not be just addressing this pandemic, but the SDG framework should continue to guide in terms of investments, in terms of targets that we take forward. So that's something that I would put out. And secondly, I think this whole engagement with the government needs an institutionalized mechanism. We can't be coming in sometime when the government wants us to come in and not come in when we are not called in. So I think there needs to be a larger societal approach to promoting SDGs, promoting the rights of vulnerable communities. So I think we need to really look at a more institutionalized mechanism, whether it's VNR or SDGs. And thirdly, I would sort of say the government needs to be open to non-government data. Because right now there's a lot of data that comes out from various sources, but the government is just not willing to look at that data and look at its reality. I think there are countries that are working together on this issue, and I think we should really ask our government also to see how non-government data can be brought in. And I think civil society, we also have a role now to look how do we work. because I think at the bottom communities, those small community-based organizations that reach the bottom communities, they are at great risk of losing out on whatever skills and things they have built up. So I think as civil society, we need to look both at a larger advocacy role and also at a larger presence at the ground level. So how do we collaborate to build these two together would be very important. And I would say we need to really strengthen our panchayats to work along with us in seeing that vulnerable communities are protected and taken forward. Thank you. I would stop here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Annie, for summing it up so well. So we do want the SDG agenda. The COVID needs to be embedded within the conversation. Yes, definitely a more institutional framework of engagement, non-government data, and civil society also needs to get their act together. So with that, Bidisha, I would like to open the floor to you for your final comments. What is it? Because a couple of things have been said, but what is it that you also feel as one of the major recommendations which the panel has still not covered, but you think it's critical for the children's agenda to be not relegated and the COVID within the COVID situation. So yeah, over to you, Bidisha.
Thank you, Namrata. I think this is always the advantages of coming in at the end. I think they've covered it beautifully. I think we've talked a lot about investing in the right things within the SDG framework, not just looking at it as a pandemic, whether it's in health or social protection. But I think there I would add on that investment in learning opportunities, especially, Shaheen referred to the new normal. I think we have to be prepared for the new normal, for learning at least to be looking significantly different from what it used to be. And I think the government needs to be thinking about investing in that as well. We heard a lot about the role of civil society and participation and engagement, and I think this is crucial. I think, we have seen during this pandemic that civil society, or at least, I mean, we've seen it in India, but we've seen it globally as well, that, civil society organizations are the ones who really came forward and were there to reach that last mile, but also feed back really to the government in terms of that data and that evidence. So strengthening that space, investing in that space, not just looking at civil society as service delivery partners, but as real partners in this whole change process for a country, transformation of a country where they will hold, duty bearers and stakeholders accountable. They will bring the voices from the ground. They will invest in the monitoring as well. But I think the most important piece is the inclusion of voices of children. I think the more we provide a platform for children like Sony and their groups and so many of the other children that we work with, both in India and globally, the more we provide them the opportunity to understand their own context, they come up with the solutions themselves, right? I mean, I think Sony, her thinking is so clear that, she can see this interrelation between the whole poverty, lack of education and protection issues, and the question that she raised at the end in terms of why is education not equal for all? The whole issue of inequality. I think these are the sorts of things that we must allow space for more children and young people to participate. We need to sort of, not just bring them in, as a tokenistic, tokenistic sort of speaker or engagement. It has to be much more systematic. It has to be engaged, maybe at the Gram Panchayat level. So look at linking children and community voices at all levels of governance, right from your smallest local level for us, which would be the Gram Panchayat, right up to the state and central governments, of course. So yes, I think that there is definitely a lot more that we all need to do. I think there are a lot of learnings that we've had that could be consolidated, but really I think the need of the hour, if we want to protect that generation going forward, is to look at this in a holistic, integrated manner and approach it as one.
Thank you, Bidisha. You've kind of summed up the whole debate very meaningfully, and you've kind of got back the spotlight on the children and how children have to be central. They have to be, they have to be advocating for their rights, and we supporting them in doing so. And definitely, I think in terms of the role of civil society organizations and how civil society needs to be taken, seriously as a serious actor. And it's not the third sector we used to say. in the earlier debates. It's not that state, market, and civil society is the third sector. We are there as equal partners, and as the pandemic has shown. So with that, I would like to thank the panelists. But like we said, we are going to have a release of a report, because we've talked about evidence. We've talked about evidence generated by civil society organizations. We've talked about evidence which is community driven, and this is a piece of research which Vada Na Todo and Save the Children have collectively been engaged in. So I would request my team to just facilitate the e-release, a formal e-release of the study report. We are innovating. So we'll have an e-release of the report. It's called Leave No Child Behind, Snapshots of Children of Vulnerable Communities and Their Rights. Annie has already spoken about it. So because we don't have too much of time, I would just request if we could release that report, and then I will briefly share what the report is about, and then a final words from Annie and Vidisha on how the report can be used to strengthen our work to ensure that children are not left behind. So can we have the e-release, please? So this study is drawn from a larger study of 100 hotspots, snapshots of socially excluded vulnerable population groups and SDGs in India. And in this study, 9 communities from the 100 hotspots were selected to do a preliminary study of children from socially excluded and vulnerable communities. And it was found that children from these vulnerable communities are performing much lower than national averages. And just to highlight one of the findings, we have the release. Can you please, can you have the Zoom on Annie and Vidisha, please? Can they be, can the focus be there so that we can see the report?
So
yeah, great.
Innovative. We have hard copies of the report.
So it's not only, that was just the curtain raiser. We do have hard copies of the report. So without going into details, Annie, would you just in 2 lines sum up what the study really talks about, and Vidisha, how we can use this to further our agenda of children? Yeah, Annie.
Yeah, very briefly, I think what the study brings together is the interconnectedness of children with their communities, with their families, and all the rights issues that families and communities face, which then get transferred to children. So I think as child rights organizations, there is an opportunity to connecting to all other organizations and development work to say, how do we promote a better, the Dalit rights campaign, whether it's the gender rights campaign, whether it's the environment campaign. So I think both from the dimension of SDGs and looking at children holistically, this provides us a platform to look at how children's rights can be protected and integrated with other campaigns and networks, and how we can collaborate. And as I said, I think civil society, we are also at a crossroads where we need to look at how we function both in the shrinking civil spaces and also in the way the governments are functioning with regard to civil society. Thank you. That's one take that I have from this study.
Thank you so much. And Vidisha, just one final word from your side.
Very quickly from me, I think this report really brings home the fact that this whole, the inequality and how that is so true. And this is data sort of not in the COVID context, how children of some communities are truly left behind simply because of where they are born, right? And today we're having all of this conversation about racism across the world, but really for every single country to look internally and figure out what are the various forms and bases on which we're discriminating. So of course you see, for simple things like accessing Anganwadi centers or dropping out of school, there's a huge difference in the national averages and in the proportion of children who come from some of these very, very vulnerable groups, but also the discrimination that some of them still face even when they are able to access. So it's not just a question of access. It becomes a question of quality that is available to them. It becomes a question of the discrimination and the barriers that are created for them, which then push them out of the system, even if they are somehow able to access it. So I think from our perspective, as we are thinking of the SDGs, to remember that it will always be easy to reach the the top of the, the lowest hanging fruit. But I think to get to the top of the tree where, it's the hardest to reach is so crucial, and it's fundamental really to the spirit of the SDGs and leaving no child behind. So to my mind, I think that's what I want us to take away from this and use this data really to inform Save the Children's programming, and for all other organizations who are working in this space. Do use it, and I hope you find it useful.
Thank you so much. And I will just take 1 minute because we've had some very insightful, inputs in the chat box where they've talked about how children's rights in very remote areas of India, how children have been committing suicide. They've talked about the digital divide. So those are real issues. There is, where they've talked about connectivity is needed as a universal public good. It's very easy to say, have digital solutions, but do we have, I think we are just enhancing the digital device, and some children are going to be left further behind while others move ahead. So thank you so much for all the participants who've been here from India, from the region, and globally. I'm so sorry we could not really have more time to actually get into a more engaged conversation. But once again, from Save the Children, a big thank you to our panelists, to Soni, Annie, Shaheen, Vidisha, and to all the colleagues who really worked hard to facilitate this conversation. And special thanks to the team which has worked on the report from Vadana Toro Save the Children, and the number of partner organizations of Vadana Toro who facilitated the data collection process. A big thank you to all of you. So with that, I would like to say thank you, and please keep the last tagline in mind. When you ever have a conversation on SDGs,
Thank you,
please
ma'am,
don't
for
leave
inviting
any
me.
child behind. Thank you, Soni. Thank you very much. And keep up the good work. A big thank you.